The member for Dawesville.
I don't have my glasses on, I'm sorry, so everything's a bit blurred at that distance. Members, I'm back here today to do what is supposedly a maiden speech, but as many of you may know, I am no longer a maiden, and I gather that it is now called the first speech, and I guess it's no longer a first speech either, but it's still a great privilege for me to be back here today to give my opening speech to this House on my re-election to Parliament. Now, I won't do what the previous member for Balcatta was known to do during his first speeches in Parliament, which was to provide a long and detailed list of every person in his electorate who'd helped him during his election campaign, and he would produce that in a report called The Leader, which was one of the prime publications of the day. Member for Balga, apologies, the member for Balga, who would provide those details of everyone who assisted him. Now, I won't do that because I'm sure not all of the people who've helped me in my campaign wish to have their names publicly known. But I would like to thank many people who did help in my electorate, certainly those who chose me at the pre-selection committee meeting, that in itself a rather interesting event, and I was very pleased to be the winning person at that pre-selection meeting. I'd particularly like to thank my campaign team. My campaign team worked long and hard and did a great job in making sure that I would be elected to the seat of Dawesville. I'd like to thank the local branch, the Dawesville branch, who again worked very hard and were very supportive of me coming from Perth and establishing myself in Mandurah. I made the point on many occasions to those in the electorate that while I was in Perth, that I'd lived most of my life in Perth, for 40 years I'd been going to Mandurah almost on a yearly basis. My grandparents had a house in Avalon, and every year I had the opportunity to enjoy the pleasures that Mandurah, in particular Dawesville, has to offer. I'd like to thank Arthur Marshall as the former member for Dawesville. Arthur Marshall, in his 12 years as a Member of Parliament representing that area, did a huge job. There are so many things that he achieved both in our term of government and since, of which he can be immensely proud. And Arthur, during the last term of government, turned 70. Now, that's not too many 70-year-olds that would go out doing the hard work that Arthur did. And also, I think many members of Parliament coming to the end of their time tend to ease off, tend to not do the hard yards. But Arthur, as you know, was a sports person. Everything that he did revolved around sport. And his analogy for the completion of his term was that there was a tape at the end, and that he wasn't going to jog getting to that tape, he was going to sprint through the tape. And that's what he did. Up until his last weeks of Parliament, Arthur was still attending many, many functions and doing all the hard work that a parliamentarian needed to do. Now, Arthur won't be gone. I thought that when he bought the caravan and the new Prado, that he'd be off in the distance, doing what he promised Helen that he would do, and that is go on the obligatory retirement tour. But I think Helen's going to have trouble getting him away, and the caravan may remain parked for some time still in the yard, because Arthur still runs the Peel 100 Club that now has well over 200 members, and he's still working hard to improve facilities at the Peel Health Campus. And I have to say that every time someone rings me up, I say to them, well, I'm here now in Arthur's desk and I'm in Arthur's office. And I think it'll take me a fair while to get out of saying those words. Arthur was a tremendous local member, and I'm very proud of what he achieved. And I'd like to thank also Helen, who did a great job for the local community in supporting Arthur. I'd like to thank my family. It's never easy when a Member of Parliament is elected to an area outside of the metropolitan area. I'm now living down in Mandurah, and for family reasons my family will take some short time to come and join me. and so initially there's going to be some degree of separation. And my family have been right behind me in getting back into Parliament and right behind me in re-establishing my parliamentary career. I'd just like to pass on best wishes for my wife. She's currently in hospital. She's just had a major reconstruction surgery on her shoulder. And I wish her well. The Dawesville electorate, I would like to thank Mr Acting Speaker. The Dawesville electorate voted me into Parliament, and while there were some concerns about me coming from the city and pictures of parachutes in the local paper showing what the suggested mode of entry was for me getting into that seat, it was still great support that I had from the local community, and I'm very proud of the Dawesville community for electing me, and I promise to do everything in my power to carry on the good job that Arthur did and make sure that I represent them in the best possible way. Mr Acting Speaker, I'd now like to talk about local issues relating to my electorate. Issues that became very important to me during the year of campaign, and some of which I would like to have on record as to my intentions to pursue them during the next 4 years. The first, of course, is the Peel deviation. The Peel deviation had been promised by both parties, but it was through the great efforts of Don Randall, the federal member for Canning, who made sure that the funds through Senator Ian Campbell were provided as the federal contribution towards putting in that Peel deviation that meant that that project could be brought forward. I must say that the Minister for Transport was dragged kicking and screaming to earlier years of initiating construction of that Peel deviation, and we finally, after about 3 changes of years when they were going to start, got them pinned down to 2007. Now, Mr Acting Speaker, the deviation is a huge requirement, not just for my electorate, which has something like 30,000 vehicles per day driving through the heart of the electorate, but it is a huge issue for the southwest electorates, whose people have to go through the absolute disgrace that is the travel through the heart of Mandurah to get to Perth. And just on this last weekend, when having been to my father's farm in Boddington for the Easter break, I arrived back about 1 p.m, and already the traffic was bumper to bumper through the heart of Mandurah, and people, in my estimation, would have taken at least half an hour to get through the city of Mandurah, coming from the southwest regions in their holidays to Perth. Trucks travel at all hours of the day and night, particularly at night, and I have to say, perhaps declare an interest in that my house is very close to the old coast road, and at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning I can hear the trucks travelling through trying to avoid the traffic. And I believe, Mr Acting Speaker, that construction of that road can be brought forward still further. And I'd like to ask you, Premier, and the Minister for Transport to seriously look at ways in which this can be done. And there is a way to do it. My understanding from Main Roads experts is that they plan to call for expressions of interest on constructing of the deviation at the middle of this year. They intend to award the contract at some time in the middle of next year, and they expect construction, once all that design work is done, to start at the beginning of 2007. Now, Mr Speaker, the only work that needs to be done prior to the calling of expressions of interest from companies is some work on soil quality and on property purchases. Now, Mr Speaker, I don't see any reason why those two things can't be done in conjunction. I don't see any good reason why this government couldn't go out now and seek expressions of interest from companies wishing to do the construction, which is going to take at least 6 to 8 months, and during that time finalise all the work that needs to be done by government departments before they can start work. Remembering that even once the bids are made by the companies, there's still a considerable time after that before construction starts while all that design work is done. So, Mr Acting Speaker, I'd like to call on the Premier and the Minister of Transport to look very seriously at getting that done, and also to look at design. The A road, which connects that Peel deviation to the heart of Mandurah, isn't in your budget, isn't in your planning schedule, and is the only way that people using that Peel deviation, wanting to get into Mandurah, can access it, other than through a back road, which is Gordon Road, bringing large volumes of traffic into what is onto a road that was never designed for it. Mr Acting Speaker, I also want to talk about the Old Coast Road and the quality of it. Mr Speaker, in the electorate of Dawesville there is something like 20,000 persons living in that electorate, and not a lot less than occurs in many metropolitan area seats. The road going through it carries up to 30,000 vehicles a day, in many cases at a speed of 90 kilometres an hour. Now, that road is being seriously damaged by those vehicles, particularly by the trucks going through, and it's been extremely poorly maintained. The latest opportunity, I took someone from Main Roads to inspect that road, and it was in very poor condition, and the repairs that were done very poorly. Now, Mr Acting Speaker, I'm sure that the Minister for Transport wouldn't accept something like that in her electorate. She wouldn't accept an old chip road, poorly maintained, with speeds of 90 kilometres an hour in an area containing 20,000 people. It is just not acceptable to leave it that way. Now, Mr Acting Speaker, that road needs to have a full asphalt seal along its full surface. Now, I understand that the cost of this would be in the order of up to $2 million, but I'm getting further costings on that. But I will be requesting the Minister for Transport to seriously consider, given that if she starts the Peel deviation in 2007, then we're looking at least 2009 or 10 before that road is constructed. So another 5 years of 30,000 vehicles a day and increasing on just an average day. So I think it's time that that problem was addressed. The next issue, Mr Acting Speaker, is the railway line. Now, the Labor Party during the election campaign continued to say that the coalition government, if elected, would not proceed with that program as was planned. Now, that is not the case, and Mr Acting Speaker, I'd like to have it on record that the opposition as a government would have followed that program, would have ensured that that rail was going to be delivered on time and on budget. Now, Mr Acting Speaker, well, no, that is true. We didn't promise the on-budget because we had serious doubts about the Labor Party ability to meet the budget. I have to say that we also had doubts about their ability to meet the timetable. And I think the problem that they're going to have is that the unions have so much control within that rail construction system that they will provide more and more delays, and so that the Labor Party won't be able to meet that timetable. But I have to say, Mr Acting Speaker, I hope they do. My electorate certainly wants them to. All of the members on our side elected to that region hope that they do. And can I say, Mr Acting Speaker, as a warning to the Minister for Transport, don't be late. Our electorate will not accept you being late with that rail system. We will be watching you every step of the way. Mr Acting Speaker, I want to talk about the Peel Health Campus. During the election campaign, the proposed coalition government committed $21.6 million to upgrading the Peel Health Campus, doubling the size of the casualty, significant increase in beds, extra theatres, a paediatric unit, and many other requirements that are desperately needed by that hospital. Now, the Labor Party, in accepting the Reid report, have committed to no increase at all in beds at the Peel Health Campus. During the election campaign, the member for Mandurah has stated that there will be a doubling in the size of the casualty. That casualty was designed for 15,000 people per year, and it is already now seeing 30,000 people per year. Mr. Speaker, I'll be talking to the Minister for the Health, and I hope to have the support for the member from Mandurah so that this doesn't become a political issue. We don't need it to be a political football. We will be providing every support for the Minister and hope that we can convince him to increase facilities that are desperately needed at the Peel Health Campus. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about an osprey nest. Now, that may not seem like an exciting subject for a maiden speech in Parliament, but the osprey nest can be seen as you drive over the bridge, the new bridge of Mandurah. And it's a nest that's been in existence for 40 years. And sadly, during the development of the Mandurah Quay, the tree containing that osprey nest was placed within the private property of one of the developed blocks. Next door to it, that tree overhangs land soon to be developed by Mirvac Finney. And the developers are, both of them, supportive of a concept to take away that nest and move it onto a pole closer to the estuary. Now, Mr. Acting Speaker, we have film footage of the female birds, the ospreys, raising 3 chicks in that nest, using all of the tree to learn to fly, to feed, and that tree creates a great environment for the rearing of those osprey nests. And I'd just like to have it on record that myself and many of the local residents are strongly opposed to any suggestion of moving that osprey nest, and I hope in that to gain the support of government and certainly of the local council. The last local issue I want to raise, Mr. Acting Speaker, is the Fairbridge Bank and an area called Roberts Point. Roberts Point lies just to the south of the opening of the estuary in Mandurah, and about 100 years ago, CY O'Connor produced a plan that involved putting some sort of barrier going out from that peninsula out to Roberts Point. Within the estuary system, Mr. Acting Speaker, we have a significant problem of continual reforming of that bank that does 2 things. Firstly, it prevents the easy movement of vessels within that Mandurah estuary system, but secondly, it also acts to block the flow of water going out through the estuary system. Now, the Dawesville Channel, or Dawesville Cut, as it's also referred to, has been a huge improvement and has resulted in a huge improvement in the water quality to the estuary system. But there are still significant problems, particularly with acid soils lying in some of the verges of that estuary system, and the problem is that that soil is not being properly flushed out through the estuary. And I believe that an opportunity exists for government to do a project which would be very similar to what's being done in the ocean marina just north of the channel. And I would like the government, through its development arm and the local council, to work together and perhaps doing a stage 2 ocean marina, providing a significant barrier to the sand flows that currently sweep around Roberts Point, and in helping to create Fairbridge Bank, provide a much better opportunity for mooring, particularly for the cray vessels that are in the heart of residential areas, provide an opportunity for visiting vessels of much larger depth, and also provide an opportunity for ordinary people to go out onto that jetty and produce an area where they can fish and recreate and improve the whole recreation facilities for that area. Now, Mr. Acting Speaker, as the shadow spokesperson for health, I'd like to raise a few issues as to the opposition view on health over the next 4 years. Mr. Acting Speaker, I am concerned that many experts are trying to promote healthy lifestyle and preventative medicine programs as key components of a long-term strategy to reduce the burden on the health system. Now, that may be true, Mr. Acting Speaker, in the medium term, in that prevention of some diseases such as osteoporosis, which in itself is seldom a life-threatening condition, does reduce morbidity and thus reduces the use of the medical system. However, in the long term, such a strategy has the opposite effect. No matter how healthy a lifestyle we lead, at the end of the day, we have to die of something. And sadly, even with an unblemished lifestyle as led by the Premier, that life-ending event is seldom an acute episode such as a cardiovascular event, but is more likely to be something which is much more prolonged, such as cancer, something that in the time that it's produced then puts a long burden back onto the health system. Also, the prolongation of life increases the chance of all of those non-life-threatening body failure conditions affecting any of the body organs. The significant increase in hospital admissions in the 65 to 85 age groups reflects the steadily increased numbers of hospital admissions for conditions such as hip replacements and cataract surgery or renal conditions. Now, I'm not saying, Mr Acting Speaker, that it is not important to undertake preventative medicine programs to improve both the longevity and the quality of our lives. Those programs are vital, and it is important to continue them to reduce hospital admissions caused by preventable conditions. What I am saying is that we need to stop suggesting that this will reduce long-term medical costs, as in most cases it will not. My point is that we need to accept that there will be a long-term sustainable increase in demand for medical services. Preventative medicine is essential to improve the quality of our lives, but it will not, in my view, reduce the long-term demand on health services. We need, Mr Acting Speaker, to make sure that we plan properly for that increased demand. Now, Mr Acting Speaker, we're a wealthy nation, and in particular, we're a wealthy state, and it's time that we made that commitment to having the highest level of medical service of any country in the world. Our state needs to be recognised throughout the world as a centre of excellence for medical treatment. We should have the highest level of expenditure of any state in Australia on health, not the lowest, as was stated in the Australian Institute of Health Statistics for 2003. It's not good enough, Mr Acting Speaker, that this state government is willing to still accept the long waiting list in our emergency department, the ramping or bypasses of ambulances. They should not accept the long waiting list for routine surgery, or the long waiting list to be seen even before they get onto the waiting list for routine surgery. They should not accept the inadequacy of our rural health services, and they should certainly not accept the current state of our mental health services. Now, that doesn't mean, Mr Acting Speaker, that I believe that we need to provide or can afford to provide unlimited funds to the health service. History has shown that whatever funding is provided for health needs throughout the world, demand will always find a way to exceed that budget. Unlimited funding itself increases inefficiency, mismanagement and over-servicing. But, Mr Acting Speaker, the bar has been set at a level of service which most Western Australians find unacceptable, and it's time that that bar was raised. The fact that despite the famous statement by the current Premier to fix the health system, since coming to government in 2001, the Labor Party have done little other than to commission a report and make announcements about future spending. It's time now to ensure that those reforms are fully activated. And I'm sure, Mr Acting Speaker, that Minister for Health would have requested a significant increase in funds to try to resolve those issues. This government has money pouring into its coffers from increased taxes, increased royalties and increasing GST revenues. Those funds, that increase in funds, is easily outstripping the growth in health expenditure. Mr Acting Speaker, as Shadow Spokesperson on Health, you will find that I will not be constantly opposing government initiatives. And where I see a program that the opposition supports, I'll come out and say so. If I disagree, I'll say so too, but hopefully in most cases with a constructive comment to follow. It is time, Mr Acting Speaker, that this government made a serious commitment to increasing and improving health funding in this state. I believe we need to set our standards higher and aim for a level of excellence in medical care never before seen in Western Australia. And if the government accepts that goal and provides the funding required to achievement, then the opposition and myself as Shadow Minister will work hard with the government to ensure that we achieve that standard of service for all Western Australians.